People often assume that military historians are interested almost exclusively in battles and tactics and generalship. And I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity because military historians are really interested in so many things beyond what happens on the battlefield, the way that societies prepare for war, the way they think about war, and the way that the demands of war change the society. One of those that I like to focus on is what happens at the home front as a result of putting 16 million men under arms for 5 years. You take 16 million men out of the workforce, and the soldiers are the young, healthy, able-bodied men who would be working in factories and in farms. That leaves a significant shortfall. And so very early on, policymakers conclude that they're going to have to start encouraging women into the workforce in numbers that had been, up to that point, never really imagined, and also put them in jobs that are not traditionally female. The discussion about encouraging women to see the struggle as theirs has a public-facing component as well, and that's visible in these wonderful, vivid, and memorable posters that appear from 1942 to 1945. One of the ways that I've had a lot of success using these images in class is by looking at a series of them and analyzing each individual image on its own, but then asking, what do women do? What does femininity mean? How are women going to be encouraged to take on different kinds of roles? So you could start with the Keep 'em Flying Miss USA poster, which is probably the most traditional. It has a young, very conventionally attractive woman. She's made up. She's not wearing a uniform. She's in civilian clothes. She's in front of a red, white, and blue backdrop, and she's snapping off a very smart salute. And it's designed to get women to take war jobs, but it's very clear, Uncle Sam needs stenographers. A very traditional job for women, one that doesn't involve breaking any gender boundaries. You'll still be working in an office. You'll be doing work that would be considered ladylike in the early 1940s. A much more direct argument about women's role in the war effort comes in the Save His Life poster, which is another really interesting one that talks about one of the ways in which women can help the war effort in a very concrete and tangible way, which is as nurses. There's a whole series of posters that encourage women to join the nursing corps, to become part of the medical corps. And they offer all sorts of different incentives to do that. So some of the posters will talk about becoming part of a proud profession, or a chance to get a lifetime education that'll be useful even after the conflict. When I first began using this poster with classes, I would talk about the text, which says, "Save his life and find your own." In the context of that, it seems to me like what the poster is selling is nursing as a profession. Almost from the first time I used this poster in front of students, I got a very different response from a large part of the audience that said the message is maybe more complicated than that. That the way the composition is structured, the look on the woman's face, that the poster is not suggesting that you find your life as a nurse, but as a wife. The fact that there is one way to take the poster in which, service to the nation and being a supportive part of the war effort, that the end goal is to retreat that into the most traditional form of femininity as a wife and homemaker afterwards is really interesting. And I think the tension of, what roles will be acceptable for women, and how fast will this social change go as a result of the war, and how far will it go, and what will happen when the war is over. And I think in 1943, 1944, those are all open questions, and certainly not as urgent as the more immediate questions of how are we going to fulfill labor targets and how long is this war going to last. But they're still in the background, and as you get closer to the end of the war, you start to see more and more explicit discussion about what is going to happen when this great conflict comes to an end. A lot of the discussion that's geared towards business owners, factory managers, is much more directed about this is how things are going to be. And I think that's a conversation that's occurring among the men about what's going to be necessary, than to suggest to them ways that they could manage that transition and take advantage of it. There's a great one called You're Going to Employ Women, which just in its title lays out this is going to happen. Despite the fact that it's encouraging women to break barriers, at the same time, a lot of the text is really incredibly patronizing. It treats these potential women workers as childish in some ways. I mean, it suggests that some of the advantages of employing women are nimble fingers, attention to detail. So at the same time, it's suggesting that you can break gender roles. It's also reinforcing them at the same time. So that's a fascinating tension, and this is another place where it helps to turn your hindsight off a little. We know that the end of the Second World War is going to be the beginning of the largest peacetime economic expansion in American history. If you turn your hindsight off, though, and you forget that you know that, you can imagine that the period 45, 46, 47 is actually really terrifying to return to, because the lived experience of the people who had gone to war and returned from the war, the decade before the war for them is the Great Depression. And so you can see how men coming home are starting to get nervous about where are they going to fit back into the economy and what's going to happen. And will the genie go back into the bottle now that women have been, encouraged actively to get out of the home sphere and to play a more dynamic role in the economy? Like, will they be willing to go back? This is one of those ways in which military historians, I think, need to reach out and work more closely with people who study other things, because military historians can easily get weighed down in the tactics and operations of what's going on and miss the bigger picture of how the mobilization effort to fight this war changes some of the very fundamental things about the fabric of American society